Sir, shall I start?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. I am Sri Murugan. I am working at Dr. R. Prashant from 2015. Um, my topic is like heterostructure photoanode for photoelectrochemical hydrogen generation. So why I am interested in this topic? It's we know that energy demand increases day by day, and which causes global warming, and because of that, this climate change is happening. So we are we are seeing that one. So in order to avoid this further, so it's further increase of global warming. So we need to use renewable energy. Okay, now we'll see that main part. So, so why we need hydrogen as a alternative fuel for existing fossil fuel? So it is completely clean energy with zero emission. So we will not get any emission like carbon. We are getting carbon dioxide. We are getting. So it's completely green. So as we get as a resultant product will be a water. We can use it in a mm, fuel cell like that. So this hydrogen energy have high energy density compared to the existing fuel, uh, and it is easily transportable and easily can storable. So it is better efficient, better than batteries also. So this hydrogen can be produced in three popular method. One is hydrolysis, and the photoelectrochemical method, and photocatalysis methods. So all this method have some disadvantages also. So if we first see that electrolysis, we know from our childhood, even if you use a two electrode and to connect with some DC power supply, and depending upon that terminals, one side we will get oxygen, and another side we will get a hydrogen. So here actually you have to supply a DC supply. So it means you have to give a power supply. So so it's again we are forced to use that fossil fuels. So even though it is a faster, we will get a faster hydrogen production, but we need electrical power to run it actually. So whereas in photoelectrochemical cell, uh, so it's similar to that electrolysis, whereas here this one electrode is uh, replaced with semiconductor materials. So we have to make a semiconductor such a way that it will interact with the sunlight and produce electron volt pair. And if it complete that circuit, and then we'll get a hydrogen. We'll see it in clear in next slide. So here sunlight is used as a primary source. It's much abundant, and then this the rate of hydrogen production is moderate compared to that hydrolysis method. Whereas in photocatalysis methods, so that it's similar to that photoelectrochemical method where sunlight is used as a primary source, whereas this hydrogen production is very slow. So because we are not supplying any external supply, also it is will be very slow. So here we are supplying an external source, but it is very small. It's in the order of zero point 0.1 volt. So it is. So we'll see that clearly here, photoelectrochemical cell. So it's I little bit I explained it in the previous slide. It is a semiconductor. The photoanode is made up of semiconductor. So that's light interacted with the photoanode. So the electron volt pair get generated, and this holes will be transported to the electrolyte, and it will go to the counterpart. And this generated electrons will go to the counterpart and produce hydrogen. So you can see it clearly here. This consider this one is a semiconductor. So this, when the light interacted, so this if light energy is greater than the energy band gap, so it will create the electron volt pair actually. Okay, so this will be transported. This generated electrons will be transported. Here they have some primary condition to satisfy, then only you can use that semiconductor as a photoanode. So that condition is it should be a narrow band gap semiconductor, and this bandage position actually bandage potential. suitable for the overall water level splitting. So it has to be in 0.4 volt and plus 0.28 volt actually. So the overall the difference will be this. If you want to split the water and get a hydrogen means you have to supply this much of energy. Then only you will get hydrogen. Okay, and then another condition is that it should be a very stable, durable throughout the reaction. So if you run a 2 hour, 3 hour after it go bad means we can't. That is not that good then. So based on the literature survey, there are several semiconductor materials here. You can use it as a photoanode. Uh, so among them, so there are much suitable is TiO2 and zirconia oxide like that. Very few materials are suitable, very much suitable for that water splitting. And if and then another one is CDS. CDS is this band position perfectly suitable to carry out that um, carry out the water splitting. So from electro, if you use the CDS in electrochemical cell, so it will able to absorb the visible light as well as its band gap position will be suitable for hydrogen production. So I basically work on a heterostructure photoanode actually. So this heterostructure have some advantage. So we can extend the sunlight absorption range, and the photo generated carrier can be easily transferred. Faster transport will be achieved here if it is an heterostructure. I am using a type 2 heterostructures. I am not mentioned here. So that, and you can achieve the effective separation of a charge carrier also, and heterostructure will improve the photo stability of the photoanode. That is one of the condition to achieve the efficient hydrogen production. So in my work, I tried different materials. So anodized rutile TaO2 or nanotube as a photoanode. This TaO2 materials have, depending upon that uh, temperature conditions, it exists in three form: anodized rutile and brucite. So I choose an anodized and rutile because anodized is very stable, and it carrier transport will be high, and rutile is much stable than anodized also. So it's forming a type 2 stagger arrangement heterostructure. From that you can generate the generated electron volt pair will be easily transported. So another structure is CDS TaO2. So here actually this CDS will extend that absorption range up to the uh, visible visible range. So we'll cover the most of the visible light also. So electron volts pair will be high. So hydrogen generation also will be high. So another one is nickel CDS TaO2 nanotube photoanode. Here in this combination, so we adding nickel. This nickel nanoparticle will act as a uh, plasmonic dual role actually. It will first part will be it will act as uh, a plasmonic effect so that it will enhance absorption and it covers a longer wavelength range also. So if compared to the CDS, we'll get more, we'll able to absorb more amount of light. We can see the detailed version here. So I made some kind of a TiO2 nanotube. We can see it here. This is a nanotube. So top view, and then it is a cross section view. So our photoanode is uh, made up of TiO2 nanotubes. So their diameter is something 92 nanometer. So it is so porous, and then the uh, length of the tube is also 7.6 micrometer. And then rutile nanoparticle is Dr. plated over TiO2, anodized TiO2 nanotube. Um, we can see the particle also. So it's like if you arrange, we can if we made this one, then we'll get a kind of a structure here. This is anodized blue color one, and then brown color one is anodized medium. So both the electrode will generate a photo generator carriers will be generated. So it will easily transfer it. Since it is a staggered arrangement, it can easily transfer the electron here. So you can see the UV absorption spectra. So this anodized will cover up to some 390 3980 nanometer, whereas in rutile it extends its absorption range slightly up to 440 range. It's much more evidence. Whatever we did, we have conducted some experimental also, and that it is recorded here. So after that, we have conducted linear sweep voltammetry. So here you can see that here this range is also get extended in the rutile rutile part rutile part. We can see that some extended range actually, and then finally we check the photo stability. um, so it is much stable here. Up to we conducted up to some 10 minutes 600 seconds. So it is so stable, so this photo correction is not there. So this one is used as a one of a water not material in my experiment. And next one is a CDS TiO2 nanotube. So, uh, so first we'll from the TiO2 nanotube or the CDS nanoparticle will be electrode deposited. You can see it here. So this electrode, uh, this is a systematic view of that thing. So you can see it. This is a titanium metal. So after TiO2 nanotubes electrochemically anodized. After that, CDS nanoparticle is electrodeposited. So this is the SEM field emission electron microscopy image. So you can see here this a nanotube or that CDS nanoparticles are decorated here. Uh, so this is a TEM image, high resolution tunneling electron microscope image. So this one is a much more clear. So this is a nanotube. So you can see it here. So but this one is a broken nanotube where the CDS nanoparticle is attached to here actually. Okay, at the uh, edges of the TiO2 nanotube. So here from the UVs we can clearly see this black color line is a TiO2 nanotube. It have absorption range up to 380 nanometer. So once a CDS is deposited, so it will extend the absorption range. So I conducted a different experiment. So I tried to deposit a CDS at different conditions. So from 100 to 100 seconds to 20 minutes. So overall, if I increase that absorption, so the um, absorption is also increasing. So another one is a quantum efficiency. This quantum efficiency is nothing but that at particular wavelength, how much electron volts pair is generated. So here in TiO2 will TiO2 will generate a few amount of electron volt pairs. It will create more number of electron volt pairs. Where so the TiO2 is an indirect band gap materials. Maybe Sarah thought you. So because of the indirect band gap, so there will be a recombination will be there. So once we electrode deposit that CDS nanoparticle, we can see that the absorption limit is also extended after, and then we can enhance the absorption is also, so enhanced electron volts pair is also generated. That's why we are getting the better efficiency. Okay. So so from LS linear sweep voltammetry, we can see that this how much current is produced if you varying the voltage. So for TiO2 is very low. So if you increase that electrode deposition, CDS particle or TiO2 nanotube, so it is current density is also increasing. The final part is photo stability. How much the prepared electrode is stable for a particular duration of time. So I conducted for this 5 minutes, 300 seconds. So it is more stable here, and it able to produce something uh, 2 milliampere per centimeter square current consistently. So, and third work is nickel CDS TaO2 photoanode. Um, so, this is our TaO2 nanotube. So that blue color line is a CDS. Blue color circle is a CDS. You can see it here, and then yellow color is nickel nanoparticles. So initially, what will happen? So this will interact with the light. So meetings at the on. Okay. Sir, 1 minute, sir. I'll be back. Sir.
Okay.
So, so shall we start now?
Yes, yes, proceed.
Okay. So nickel is a metal particle. So once it interact with the light, so it will efficiently separate that. So it first will break that whatever that absorb light into uh, short waves and short wavelength light and um, long wavelength light. Uh, from that, it will efficiently transport that. From that, it will create the electron volt from CDS or TaO2 particle. So after that, it will able to separate and transfer that charge carriers also. So and this is the that systematic diagram of that one. So you can see it here, the FSM image of nickel and CDS deposited TiO2 nanotubes. So here, this is a monochromatic image. We can see the separate that CDS and nickel nanoparticles. So this is the EDOX mapping. So the map, each color represent what kind of element present here. So from that we can clearly see that CDS, CDS and the nickel particles are presented here. So, as I told you that this will produce a plasmonic effect, you can see it here. There is a enhanced absorption um, compared to that CDS TaO2. There is a enhanced absorption is uh, uh, present. Uh, it's giving a enhanced absorption here. So as well as that, I varied the nickel deposition time, and I checked that how much amount of current produced here. So if I vary the uh, nickel deposition times, and this current is also varying at particular deposition times, I'm able to get some 3 points, sorry, 6.5 mm, milliampere per centimeter square current density is recorded. So, and this one is the impedance spectra. Impedance spectra represents how much this photoanode is able to transfer the generated photo carriers. So you can see it here. So if the very small semicircle uh, shows that efficient transfer of charge carriers. So you can compare it here. The pink color one is a nickel CDS TiO2 tube. So it able to efficiently transfer the charge carriers compared to that CDS TiO2. So you can see it here also. There is one more comparison is also there. Bare TiO2, it's like uh, the charge transfer rate is very slow, because I told you that it is an indirect band gap semiconductor. There will be a chance of getting recombinations. So once it is nickel deposited, so it considerably reduce. So this nickel act as a dual role here. It able to transfer the charge carrier also. and then we calculated the hydrogen production rate for each of these photoanode. So this TaO2 this able to produce a small amount of hydrogen, and then a nickel generated it is uh, considerably high compared to the TaO2, whereas CDS so much higher than nickel TaO2 because it able to cover the visible portion of the solar spectrum, so it will able to give much higher hydrogen production rate, whereas at nickel CDS TaO2 photoanode able to achieve the most highest hydrogen production rate of 2.5 millimoles per gram per hour. That is highest one. Uh, so that's it, sir. So there are some more materials are there. So if anyone is interested, can try this one.
Okay, that's a nice presentation. I think the students now have some idea of what is meant by scientific research. How you are really doing a scientific research. This presentation is a typical one for that scientific research. You have a problem. You are identifying a problem, then finding a technological solution so that, and then you are proving that with different experimental studies. You need a clear proof that the solution you are suggesting is really working. So you have to do a set of experiments in different way to convince that your system is really working. In that sense, this presentation is very clear. The idea is producing hydrogen. Hydrogen is the cleanest energy available in the universe, and it is hydrogen is abundant, but there are a lot of problems in getting hydrogen because in Earth crust, free hydrogen is not really available. Most of this hydrogen is attached to oxygen and then available in the form of water. So you have to split it. But if you are going for a conventional kind of electrolysis process, then you have to spend normally the fossil fuel energy, and also you have to spend more energy for producing hydrogen than what you are getting from hydrogen. Normally 1 kilogram of hydrogen you can expect 33 units kilowatt hour of energy. So you have to find another alternate solutions for producing hydrogen. One way is using solar energy directly to split, but the difficulty is you have to find a proper electrode that can harvest the solar energy directly and uh, use to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. So now, what kind of electrode? What is the conditions need to be satisfied by the electrode? These are all known to us. So then, some electrodes who can produce the potential for splitting the water that cannot harvest the full energy, the maximum energy from sun. So we have to make multiple layer systems, heterostructure systems, so that you can harvest more energy. That is one idea, and then you have to improve that process by some photocatalytic activities, so that you can again further increase the current used by the system. So this is the way you are developing the concepts, and then you are implementing the concepts and proving that concept, that this concept is working. Then in a later stage, if these ideas scientific all scientific ideas may not be converting into a scalable device technologies, many such ideas together are going to the technology. And then industries, if it is commercially viable technology, then industries will adopt such technology and bring it into market. This is the way it is. The technology development is going. Okay. The next presentation is by Aparna. Aparna, please log your presentation.
Sorry, is my presentation visible, sir?
Yes, yes. You have to make it into presentation mode.
Okay. Now it is in presentation mode.
We can see it in normal
Okay, okay.
display mode. You can check.
Sir, now it is in full
Yes, yes,
presentation mode.
yes. Proceed.
Okay. Hi everyone. I am Aparna Marcos. I am a second year research scholar in Nano Photovoltaic Laboratory, Department of Green Energy Technology. I have joined just before Corona, so many experimental works are pending. So I will just go through the overall process of what I am doing, where I am now. So you may find it very easy to understand. So basically, I'm interested in heterojunction solar cells. So you are already aware about same material solar cells or homojunctions because you are studying silicon solar cells in the class. You have learned about p-type doping and n-type doping and the structure of solar cells in the first year. So there is a different type of solar cells which you are not very much aware of, that is heterojunction solar cells. In here we are using different p-type and different n-type material and bonding them together to create a p-n junction, and this p-n junction will be acting as a solar cell. So this material is not only for solar cells, we are also using this kind of heterojunctions in various fields. In all the semiconductor fields we require this kind of heterojunctions. They possess different properties than homojunction solar cells and materials. So this is the structure. As you can say, I will use a pointer now. You can see a homojunction solar cell. See, you can see in here p-type silicon and there will be n-type silicon. Doping will be used to create this p-type and n-type. And in here, you can see heterojunction solar cell. You can see this is an n-type titanium dioxide and p-type copper oxide on a glass, conductive glass material. So that this is a solar cell, a very small solar cell, which is affordable and easy to make in our labs. As you know, silicon solar cells are require very large amount of heat processing because basically you're taking sand and making silicon from it, so it's a huge process. But this kind of solar cell, heterojunction solar cells, are very easy to make. You can make in your home, or I mean in your home means in your own laboratory in Pondicherry University. But it just needs some very sophisticated contacts. That's all you need. So you can see a microscopic image of glass in here and titanium dioxide in here and copper oxide in the on the top. And this is another example of a heterojunction solar cell with a nano architecture. So right now in our university, I'm interested in this kind of work. I am in our lab. We have already developed. My seniors and Srimurugan, of course, developed titanium dioxide nanotubes. So I will be taking this nanotubes and modifying them to make a heterojunction solar cell. So basically, they will look like this. You can see the nanotubes will inside the zinc oxide layer so that it will create lot of junctions than just a normal solar cell. The normal solar cell have very small area, right? But when it is nanotubes, in Elimelech sir's class you have already learned, when you are coming to nano level, the surface area increases, so that you are dealing with miles and miles of surface area in a small area, so that we assume that it will have more effect than just a normal uh, normal solar cell. So this is just a process to show you how it is happening. A copper foil, it's a copper foil based solar cell, and you do a thermal oxidation for 3 hours in furnace, and thermal oxidation we heat it in oxygen so that it will become copper oxide nanowires. This is a nanowire based solar cell. In our case, we will be creating titanium dioxide based nanotubes, and you will put zinc acetate ethanol solution for zinc oxide layer, and you will just use you will heat it up in 350 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. You will get a zinc oxide layer, so that it is and you put all the contacts, you got a solar cell. So this is simple as that, but even if it is simple, there are practical difficulties while you actually make it. But anyway, better than silicon solar cells. Why we need this heterojunction? Like there's already PN junctions, and they're already established silicon solar cells everywhere. But why we require heterojunctions? Because one reason is low thermal budget. You can make it everywhere. Right now in India, nobody makes solar cell. You are importing, you are from uh, China or any other places. You're buying it from there. And another thing is avoiding degradation of minority carriers. So this specific cell structure have it reduces, its thickness is very less. So degradation of minority carriers, like when electrons and holes are generated, when the sunlight is falling on the material, the bulk material itself, while traveling through the material, it is itself taking most of the carriers and just recombining it. But when it is thin, the recombination is very less, because the length it has to travel is less. So you will get more electrons out of your solar cells. That more electrons means more current, and it also have relatively high efficiency and good stability under light and thermal exposure. So there are side effects also, but we will discuss it in another time. So right now, what am I doing now in our laboratory? So I am developing a titanium dioxide based heterojunction solar cells. I already told you titanium dioxide based nanotubes have already developed in our laboratory. So I'll be taking them and using them for making a titanium dioxide copper oxide based solar cells. Why titanium dioxide? Because it's abundant in nature. You can just take the material information on earth, and this is the most you will get, titanium. And potentially it have a potential like potentially higher conduction bandage energy and lower recombination rate. But it also have a problem with conductivity, very low conductivity. When you take the list of elements conductivity, titanium dioxide have very low conductivity, so you need to fix it. So you can use any ways to fix it in your lab. You can change the structure, you can dope materials into it. Anyway, if you increase the conductivity, then you will get a more better heterojunction solar cell. So I have already talked about nano architecture. So you have seen one nano architecture in the previous slide. So nano architecture is also possible. And where am I right now? Maybe you may associate with my work or may not. So I just wanted to tell you where am I. So I have already developed separate layers of copper oxide and titanium dioxide. And right now I'm just on the second year. So we are in the process of making the solar cell. And right now, because of COVID, and there's a gap, so we are also doing the machine learning part of uh, same experiments. So in our laboratory we usually do the experiments. So we like already Sri Muruganan told all of you that how to do an experiment. You take two different electrolytes, you make a circuit out of it, and one is anode and one is cathode. So you pass the current through the electrolyte, you will get a deposition, or you will get an oxidation, or anything on the material you want. So that we are trying to make similar kind of environment in computer by using the data. We will feed the program with the data. If it is 2 volt, what will be the output? If it is 3 volt, what will be the output? If it is ammonium fluoride, what will be the output? Like that. And without doing the thousands of experiments, you can actually you know, choose 10 experiments, 10 best possible outcomes using prediction algorithms. So right now you are already aware about MATLAB and predictions. So uh, it's affordable for us to do that. So right now I am doing the prediction. I am successful at low level predictions. Right now we are trying to modify it. So these are the information I'm giving to my computer. You can see different types of nanotubes. Already my seniors developed, Jodi and Clement, and developed this. And these are the same image, scanning electron microscope images of their data. So I'm basically taking this data for programming right now, so that I can understand what is the best possible experiment without actually doing it. And this is a spider python. It's basically a python language. And you may already aware about python, already tried it. So this is one of the best interactive platform. It is in Anaconda. So I basically write my programs in here. You can look at this. I'm right now somewhere in the middle. uh, so that's it. This is the overall work. And those who are doing something related with my work may be working in heterojunction solar cells, or if the university is not opened, then we may be working in the programming session. Thank you so much. You can find me in my email address, WhatsApp, or phone at any time you need. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So we are trying with this heterojunction solar cells. Metal oxides are another possibility for future solar photovoltaic conversion. So we need new materials for photovoltaic conversion, for simple and cost-effective technology development. Uh, we are extensively doing work in titanium dioxide. So with the help of titanium dioxide, how we can make a good heterostructure. The research part, because of corona, she is unable to execute that work again. Once you are forming a nanostructured material and making heterojunctions, you will get surface area, high surface area, but at the same time you will struggle with the surface defects, because when the surface area is increasing, surface defects will also increase. And sometimes we have to address this kind of interfacial effects, how it is going to affect our device and how to overcome such difficulties when, and trade-off happening between the positives and negatives of making such kind of device structures. You have to explore with different experimental technique, that some of that techniques Sri Murugan explained in his presentation. A lot of different experiments, imaging techniques, spectroscopy technique, then impedance analysis, then IV curve measurement for solar cells. So quantum efficiency measurement, many such techniques you have to use for understanding what is really happening, where you are losing your current. So normally everybody is trying to get more current, because voltage is almost like fixed, VOC is almost like fixed, because it is the Fermi level difference of your junction property, say, that is coming from that. Some researchers are still working with VOC also, but normally every researcher is focusing to get high current. That is why in our research you can see we are trying to improve the current out of it. How maximum current we can get out of these devices. That is the strategy we are adopting. Okay, we hope after in few months' time, things will come back to normalcy. Then Aparna can prove many of the concepts experimentally and come up with good results. And now Soumya is also a new batch PhD student, exactly in the middle of pandemic she joined, and I think in between the pandemic, after the first lockdown, only we started recruiting PhD students last year. Then hardly she got 2 months in university. So she's mostly focusing with her coursework right now, but at the same time she's working with some concepts are developed, what she should do. She may explain a little bit about her concepts. Soumya.
Yes, sir. I'm present here. Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, make it in presentation mode.
Uh, it is in
Proceed. Proceed, yeah.
okay, sir. So currently I'm myself Soumya Jha, and currently I'm first year PhD student. So as said, I am right now learning all the concepts related to the supercapacitor, which is my area of research, and I in future I will try to develop high performance supercapacitor based in the on doping of titanium dioxide. So, what is the motivation behind using means doing research in the field of supercapacitor? As we all know that all non-renewable resources like petrol, coal, all these are depleting day by day, and within few years, like in 50, 60 years, these will be completely finished. So, in order to meet future energy demand, we should use clean source of energy, and moreover these non-renewable resources are generally um, not eco-friendly, and they are in hazardous to our health also. So it is better to use clean source of energy, and clean source of energy includes solar energy, wind energy, and geothermal energy, and there are also various kind of energy which are time and location specific. You cannot get in each and every place, so it is better to develop such type of devices in which we can store energy and use and meet our energy demand. And to meet so there are various types of energy storage devices like batteries, supercapacitors, fuel cells, in which I will be discussing about supercapacitors. uh, Supercapacitor is an electrochemical storage devices. It consists of this electrode material in which is generally made up of which are generally highly porous, and for right now in industrial purposes it is made up of activated carbon material which is mixed with some conductive agent and binders, and and it has some liquid electrolyte which is different capacitor, which consists of solid dielectric medium. And to collect all the current, there is one current collector plate. This red one and blue one is the current collector plate, which is generally a metal plate. And and these two, there is while charging and discharging, what happens? Positive and negative sources develop. So to separate this positive and negative source, generally a separator is used. generally a separator is used, and there are various kind of supercapacitor depending upon the type of charge stored. When the charge is stored in electrostatic manner, it is known as the EDLC or double layer capacitor. And various materials which are used are activated carbons, carbon aerogels, and carbon nanotubes are used. And if the charge storage is by the electrochemical method, then it is known as the pseudo capacitor. And materials which are used is conductive polymer and metal oxide. Some of recently a type of supercapacitor is developed in which charge capacitor is in both method, that is by both electrostatically and electrochemically, and such kind of capacitor is known as the hybrid capacitor. The capacitance range of this supercapacitor ranges from 10 farad to 10 kilofarad. Now, um, as we all know, till now in the market demand of supercapacitor is not increased. It is due to various kind of existing problems in the field of supercapacitor technology. And these challenges can be divided into three parts. One is the technical problem, another is its electrical parameter model, and third one is the means consistency detection. Uh, in our lab, we will be mostly focusing on this technical problems. Technical problem includes that the energy density of the supercapacitor is not very high, and it also have high self discharge. It also have the tendency of high self discharge. So we will be focusing on this uh, this problem. And the other two problem are like electrical parameter model. uh, Generally we can see, we observe that the supercapacitor is model are equivalent to this ideal model, and which but in real case we don't live in this ideal model, which which can bring such various potential risk, and that cannot be unheeded. And uh, in consistency detection method, we can see that the voltage of the supercapacitor is very low, and it requires lot of series connection in the field of practical applications. Now, from this graph, you can observe that the fuel cell have high energy density, whereas electrolytic capacitor have high power density. High energy density is means it can store as much as energy it can, but at high power discharge, the electrode capacity of the electrode of such kind of material will deplete. So after that, battery was developed, and different kinds of battery was developed in which both energy density and power density was enhanced. But the power density of the battery is very low, whereas in electrolytic capacitor, the energy storage energy density is very low. So uh, in electrochemical capacitor, that is supercapacitor, uh, it is it is said that it is thought that it can be the connecting link between both battery and supercapacitor, as lot of research work is going on to enhance both its power density as well as its energy density. Now, moving on to the titanium dioxide part, as Aparna said that it is a mostly uh, abundant material, and it has partial Knight's capability. It is also of low cost and have low toxicity. Uh, Titanium dioxide also have some unique properties, like it have excellent biocompatibility. Generally, these material is found in three phases. One is the anatase phase, which is tetragonal in structure. Another one is the rutile phase, and the third one is the brookite phase. Anatase phase is tetragonal in structure. Similarly, rutile, which have the band gap of 3.3 electron volt, Similarly, rutile also have this tetragonal phase, which have band gap of 3.05 electron volt, and the brucite have uh, the orthorhombic phase. Among these three materials, generally for most of the experimental analysis, we generally take anatase phase, because it have very high band gap and high conduction bandage gap and high conduction bandage. And it is found that the rutile is the most thermodynamically stable material. Now, moving on to the doping in the which I am intended to work, doping in the titanium dioxide. uh, Titanium dioxide. Doping is a method in which small kind of impurities are introduced in the lattice of the material, and this mechanism is generally used to improve the efficiency in the supercapacitance by improving its structural, morphological, electrical, and optical modification of the parent semiconductor. Uh, by doping, we can also lower or widen the bandgap material of the semiconductor, and due to which the due to by doping also, it can create impurity in the energy level, and also can also create oxygen vacancy. Doping process also creates large dipole moment, so electron transfer kinetics can change, as a result of which the conductivity of the parent material can increase. So, now, one of the MTech students did a very good job in finding various kind of metal. Debanita, she did a very good job in finding various kind of doping material that has been used in different field. But in the supercapacitor field, it is still a very new concept. So these are the various kind of metals till date, elements till date, that has been doped with titanium dioxide. And most of the elements which has been doped come from the transition metals. Now, there are various kind of doping methods like doping. One is normal doping, that can have metal doping, non-metal, and some metalloids can be doped. And in co-doping method, generally more than one kind of metals have been doped. It is generally preferred from doping because because uh, it shows very unique properties in the open circuit voltage, as well as in the short circuit current. And another type of doping method is the composite method, in which two different types of materials are conjoined, in which both of the property both in which both of the material have different physical, chemical, and thermodynamical properties. When they are mixed or conjoined, at that time the properties of the new material is completely different from the property of the parent material. So currently, there are various kind of research problems that can emerge in this field. We can study about the effect of various types of surface effect of various types of surface on doped titanium dioxide. Like, we can take different type of surfaces, like planar surface, cylindrical, and spherical surface, and we can learn about it in by doping in titanium dioxide. We can do it at first in MATLAB, and after that we can do it in experimental also. In future, I am planning to find out a suitable dopant or composite material for doping in titanium dioxide, and read its material as well as structural characterization for further studies. That's it.
Okay. Okay, very good. So that is also clear, because titanium dioxide is a material with which has uh, multi-purpose material. It is a, you can call it as a multi-purpose material. So you can use it for photovoltaic application. You can use it for hydrogen generation. You can use it for energy storage and many other areas. Titanium dioxide is widely exploring for use, and it is also considered as a future energy material. Means in different departments of energy, green energy, this material may have a significant impact. That's why we are exploring this material, and we successfully fabricated electrodes with nanotubular structures that makes much more surface area and better properties for the electrode. So in future we could be able to develop better device structures. Now we are moving to the presentation of Anandi. She's your senior. She just finished her MTech. She's very enthusiastic about data analysis. She worked with photovoltaic power plant analysis, and she will give a brief idea about her dissertation work. Anandi, please proceed.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, 1 second, sir. I will share my presentation. Okay. Shall I start, sir?
Yes, yes.
Um, Actually, just now I have completed my MTech degree. I have did seasonal and performance analysis of solar power plant data by developing ML algorithms, by dealing with ML algorithms. Um, and what is the overview? Actually, I have got one power plant data, which is of 60 megawatt capacity. The location is in Karnataka near Bellary, and this is the latitude and longitude details. I have analyzed. I have got two sets of data sets. One is a weather monitoring system data set, and another is a gross generation, the generation data set. Merge the data according to the seasons of Karnataka, as it is located in Karnataka, and then done seasonal analysis. This is the WMS dataset, weather monitoring system dataset. What they have calculated is they have calculated the weather data like plane of array irradiance, um, global Hartley index. A battery is connected to a single solar panel, and then a panel temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, wind direction, everything they have measured. And this data is available at a 15 minutes time interval. Um, then generation data. These are the data available in generation data sets. POA in kilowatt hour. This is again plane of array irradiance in kilowatt hour. They have measured it for this generation data set also, so that we can compare it with the gross generation data set. Uh, on time in minutes, that is plant operating time in minutes, and then weather, what is the weather on that day, whether it's cloudy, sunny, partially cloudy or rainy, and then performance ratio in percentage. We have calculated both performance ratio in percentage and also the capacity utilization factor in percentage, but I have taken performance ratio in percentage, which is better for solar power plant data analysis. So this data is available for each single day data is available. The duration is each single day for the complete year 2017 is available. So I have analyzed it. Data analysis using Python. I have used a Python programming language for data analysis. Why Python for data analysis? It's an extremely powerful library. There are it's of free and open source. Amazing documents are available. These are the Python packages relevant to data analysis. Scientific computing libraries like NumPy, Pandas, SciPy, which you would have gone through in the Energy Lab 3, I think so. Then visualization libraries like Matplotlib, Seaborn, etc. Everything is available. We can visualize the things, and then algorithmic libraries. Scikit-learn, stats model, like the libraries are available. These are the three different models I have developed: a linear regression model, a multiple linear regression model, and then a polynomial regression model. Linear regression is nothing but we can fix one predictor and one target variable to develop the model. Here I have fixed plane of array variance in kilowatt hour. For gross generation dataset only, I have developed these three models, not for the WMS dataset. Then for multiple linear regression, we can fix 2 or 3 predictor variables for as a predictor and target as a gross generation in kilowatt hour. Polynomial regression is nothing but we can fix a higher order terms for the predictor variable, and we can fit better than linear regression. That's the concept of polynomial regression. First of all, we have to import the data. The data which I have received is in actually is in Excel format, but for convenience, I have converted it into CSV format. It's nothing but comma separated values. In that, data are separated by commas. Each line represents a row in data sets. Very easy to import in most of the tools and applications for data analysis. And the first row in the here, it's is the header of the column name, and these two are important factors while importing a data into. I have worked in Google Colab, so these two factors are the most important. Like the format and the file path of datasets. Format, we all know that CSV, JSON, XLS, everything is available. I have used a CSV file, and the location, whether we saved it in desktop at that particular file path we have to input. This is the code just I have used to import the data. Um, then what is the procedure I have followed for seasonal analysis and personal analysis? First, I have done initial stage of data analysis. Um, it's nothing but what type of data types. There are different types of data types. We all know. We have to check it whether it is correctly detected. Sometimes integer or float may be detected as object, so it will be a problem for further analysis. So we have to first check that I have rounded off the decimal values of a float so that it is there will be a uniformity in analysis. And these are the two initial stage of analysis I did. And then I pre-process the data. Pre-processing, it's also known as data cleaning or data wrangling. Um, Converting a raw data. The data we collect from different source. It may be from different source, but it will be a raw data. So we have to pre-process it, clean it, and then only we can go for further analysis. Like we can identify and handle the missing value. We can do unit conversion, that is called as data formatting, and then we can do data normalization. We can bring all the data into a similar range of values. For statistical analysis, it is a better one. And then we can go for data binning. To bin at what range of data are available, we can do that. And then we can turn a categorical variable into a numeric variable. If two type of data is available in a single column, we can convert into zeros or ones so that it will be better for statistical analysis. Then I went for advanced statistical correlation. This is nothing but exploratory data analysis. In that, I have used advanced statistical correlation. In that, I have found the Pearson correlation value. This is the table you can see here. If it is in this range, this is the if it is in 0.9 to 1.0, there will be a very high positive correlationship. It is if it is in minus, a very high negative correlationship. Using this analysis only, I have chosen the predictor variables uh, for further analysis, and this is the range of value. And I have developed the three different models which is seen in the before slides, and then model evaluation. I have used R square value. It's nothing but a regression line is there are enormous number of data available. When we fit and see in a linear regression how close the data are fitted to a line. This R square is a statistical analysis, so we can calculate in Python. Um, so that if it is near to 1, the R square value is near to 1, then the model is said to be a good fit. So I did that, and then data visualization. If in each and every day we get lots of data available, but analyzing it in a perfect way, it can be a great changeover in research work, I guess. There are different data visualization Python libraries. You don't need to code for long lines. By importing this data visualization libraries and the other libraries as per our requirement, we can do simple coding. Because I'm also not a expert over in Python. It's just for the past 1 year I just learned Python. I did my project, and these are the libraries like Matplotlib, Seaborn, and Plotly libraries you can use and visualize it. First, initial stage. Uh, in the last slide itself, I told one should check the data type. If it is detected for by default in default manner, we have to correct it as per the requirement, and we have to round off the decimal values for uniformity in the analysis. We all know that this is the pandas data type, like object, string, object, integer, float, date and time is available. Before going for analysis, we should understand the data. That's the main point. And next thing is, this is a plot of in-plane irradiance components. Actually, they have provided me the plane of array irradiance value, but what I did is I have extracted a POA value from PV library for my analysis, and now I have visualized for comparing the mesh given data and the predicted data. In further slides, we can see about that. Uh, Merge the data according to the seasons of Karnataka. Like winter season is from January to February, summer this is for monsoon, and this is for post monsoon. And this is the explanation of all the data, like POA global, which is the main requirement, like total in-plane irradiance component. Uh, I have extracted this one and merged with the WMS data, and then used it as a predictor variable for our analysis. And then this is for the winter season analysis, just overview. This is a plot, heat map plot, which I plotted to visualize there is no missing value. Like first I did identified and handled the missing data, found average of the values, replaced it the missing with average of the column, or else dropped the entire row if it is an important column like gross generation. Because generation is not available, then it's an important column, right? So I dropped it, and this is the plot. Gray color represents no missing data, and pink color represents there is gray color represents no missing data, pink color represents there is missing data. Here we can see that there is no missing data. Uh, then we can find the correlation. Correlation, we all know that we can correlate two values. I have customized this heat map for correlation in winter season. so that if it is near to 1 or near to -1, then it is said to be highly correlated. For example, if we take this POA from PV library in watt per meter square, when we compared it with the battery voltage, it is 0.92. Then it is highly correlated. Then we can use this as a predictor and this one as a target variable. Like this, I have compared, and we can visualize easily using this plot, and we can do further analysis. Mm. And then this is the Poisson correlation coefficient I have calculated for example, we can compare here POA watt per meter square, which is from the plant data, versus battery voltage is 0.66. The description is nothing but moderate positive correlation. When we compare this for winter season, POA from PV library, it's also a moderate positive correlation. Just to understand the correlation, I've done this. Next, we can also plot um, this. These dots are the data points, and this line is a regression line. So I have plotted relative humidity versus panel temperature. This is for winter season, and this is for summer monsoon. And this is for post monsoon, and um, this one is the box plot. Like I have studied the relative humidity value, so that in winter season this is the range, which just varying from below 20 to nearly 75 something. This some data are scattered, and we can see in monsoon and post monsoon comparatively high when compared to this. But only by visualization, some things can be. Sometimes we can't come to a conclusion. So I have calculated the Poisson correlation coefficient. From here, we can confirm that it's a moderate negative correlation, not a strong or high correlation. So it doesn't affect the performance that much. Um, and then now I am just working on a PVC software. I'm just creating a report that which is similar to the performance analysis of a power plant, which I have analyzed, uh, which is of a. Here you can see I have extracted the data. This is the predicted data from PVSys. I have extracted the data, and this is a violin plot using Python library. Uh, for monsoon is in this range. This is a measured value plot, and this is a predicted plot, so that I can compare this, and we can come to a conclusion. As we can see, there is a difference in range. In this, it's not wider because this one is a day-wise data, and this predicted data is a month-wise data. That's why we can see the difference. Um, and I have also used extracted that this data like a gross generation and power injected into grid from the PVC software. This one is the gross generation data, and power, how much power injected into the grid. And here we can see the difference. Mm, like I have tried this one recently, like season versus gross generation. These plots are for weather. If it is in sunny, if the weather is in sunny, for winter season, this is the range of generation of time. Like this, I have compared it just for visualization and better understanding. And this is similar. This one is power injected into grid. I have calculated the power injected into grid from the data available by doing simple calculations in Excel sheet. Then I have plotted this gap plot from season library. Similarly, I have plotted season versus power injected into grid. This mentions the weather, and this one is for comparative plot of POA of measured. This here we can see POA irradiation measured value of interseason, and this one is the predicted. This blue dots are a measured value, and this one is a predicted variable. Time versus irradiation plot. So here you can see the how much difference is coming. Like that, this is for the seasons. Um, and I have plotted tried this plot from power plant data like time versus air temperature and panel temperature. Um, this orange dot is of panel temperature, and it's blue dots of air temperature. Like this, I have plotted for season wise. Mm, This is just for time versus battery voltage. This blue dot is for winter season, and orange dot is for summer season. It's just overlapping each other. Sometimes it's just reaches the peaks. And these are the. Hello, sir. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes.
Ah, these are the ML models I have developed. Using R square, we have seen in the before slides, like using R square, and I just came to a conclusion. For winter season, this is the R square value when I kept our predictor as plane of array radiation. And for polynomial regression also, I have kept plane of array radiation and target as gross generation. We can see these values. I have compared it in season wise. When we do it in season wise, for multiple linear regression, these are the two predictors and target as gross generation. We can see that it's near to 1, which says that multiple linear regression fits better for winter, summer, and post monsoon. When compared, while in monsoon, polynomial regression fits better. That's it, sir.
Okay, fine. There was some network issues in between, I heard,
Okay.
but we recorded almost all presentations. This is about a power plant analysis, because in future we are going for a more green energy dependent world, or completely green energy dependent world, since it is the green energy resources are intermittent in nature. The energy management is a very important thing. So we have to connect different green energy resources available, and we must have a better prediction of energy production and energy demand. So now this artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are helping us to make better predictions about the energy production and energy demand. So how we can cleverly match this energy production, energy management. We have to invest our time and brain on such problems. With that in mind, we did this power plant analysis, and you can see the weather prediction. That is still, if you're looking into the literature, you can see lot of different activities are going on with different kind of algorithms of ML. You can see better and better radiation prediction works are going on, and normally the power plant follows that radiation profile. As you can also see in these studies, it is coming to a reasonably good prediction of uh, power, and it also follows the radiation. It's quite natural, because solar power plant output always follow the radiation availability. So the key point is the radiation prediction, and then the performance of your power plant. That is the thing. Related to a better radiation prediction and a better performance of your power plant. you should try to optimize your power plant so that it can produce its maximum power in all seasons. But we can see a seasonal variation in all solar power plants. So understanding that issues and making a better quality energy production from solar power plant is an important task that to some extent we addressed such kind of problems in this study. So this is more or less about our research interest and activities. Why we discussed this in the beginning of your project work is you can contribute in these activities. Some of you can follow these research areas. One we identify and assign to the students. Since it is a pandemic time, you have to spend more time on literature study, literature analysis, and making graphs based on the literature, and making protocols for final semester project work. These are some of the activities we are going to suggest to all students, because nobody can do too much of laboratory activities at this time. That is the limitation of all of us. We are all sitting at home and trying to do something. So you should spend more time with your computer, and whatever possible you can do with your computer, you should do. So your investment of your time is finally converting it into the results. Okay, fine. Next class with all students, I think with some reason, maybe internet connectivity or some other inconvenience, all students didn't join. Only we have two MTech students right now. But the main thing is, if you have any kind of inconvenience in joining for the class, then you should inform the concerned faculties, whoever it is, whether it is a mini project or coursework. If you have inconvenience, that is the good practice. Good practices you should learn from your university at the time of study. If you follow that in your profession also, you will follow such good practices. Don't anticipate things in your way, and don't make a mess out of it. We are going to evaluate your punctuality, your enthusiasm, your knowledge domain, your effort. All these are going to be evaluated, and we will try to develop multiple skills to the students, like your domain knowledge improvement, your presentation skill, your writing skill, and your computational skill. So many factors we will try to develop during. It is not just like doing something and getting into some thesis and getting a grade. Grade has no value. Believe me, there is no value for your grade. That is just an academic practice only. If you get good grade, I appreciate you. There's no problem. Always try to get the highest grade, but don't think that grade will decide your destiny. Even if you are getting, because in most of the university systems, they won't, they really don't want to fail any student, and particularly in pandemic situations, the system is very general. But don't think that in the job market all this consideration you will get. No such consideration you will get. Your domain knowledge, your hard work, and your enthusiasms, and the way you are projecting yourself, that is going to work at the end of the day. If you work reasonably well, you will definitely get a good grade. That is all. After above that, the grade, whether it is a theory course or lab course or project work, grade has not much of value. I'm not giving too much of value for getting a high grade or a low grade. Don't try to get low grade. You should try to get, always try to get good grade. That, but good grade means above B plus is always a good grade. And then you should try to get good grades in your theory courses and practicals. But that has no real value in your life. The skills you are developing through your hard work only will value at the end of the day and throughout your life. The habits you are developing at your graduate level, that will reflect in all sectors of your life, means your personal life and your career, that always reflect. So if you have inconvenience, let us know. Because of this reason I can't join for that. I can join for the meeting, or I am unable to attend the class. If you're skipping the class, or skipping the project work or lab course, you should properly inform. That is a good practice. That is meant by the good practice. And you must be systematic. You will also present in a few weeks time. We will assign jobs to you, and then you should prepare yourself and you should present also. Okay, so that is all about today. We uh, we will